All right, buddy. We are live.
How you doing?
Welcome, welcome. It's good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah,
It's been almost a year.
Jordan's grown handsome.
I know. I got long hair now. A
Yeah,
nice, a nice new beard. Life's good though, man. Uh,
exactly.
so thanks for taking the time to come on the brand new podcast, Happy Dance's Guide to the Revolution. Uh,
That's awesome.
the last one was pretty fun and
Mhm.
totally got off track and stuff, but that's kind of the way podcasts go sometimes.
Exactly.
And some people liked it, so that's cool.
Hmm.
Um, I have some bullet points that I want to kind of touch on with you today.
Sure.
I definitely want to get into the Declaration of Interdependence and some of the ideas behind it, kind of get your take on it, and then maybe touch on some of the ideas I've come up with about some things we could propose to kind of move this all forward.
Hmm.
But before we get into that, first thing I want to do is give a shout out to our first couple donors, Robert Minemeyer, who's my mom's cousin, which is cool. Family
Hmm.
love, getting some family love. That's huge, If
That is
anybody's
very
going to support
huge.
you, it ought to be your family, right? And
Yep.
as well as Maggie, I know her as Shapirsky, but I believe her marriage last name is Conti, if I'm saying that right. So shout out to them, man. It's like early adopters of this thing that's, that we're all trying to move forward. So shout out to them first and foremost.
Awesome.
So the first thing I want to talk about, though, is kind of how we met, because I feel like the way we met is probably the way people used to meet all the time, sort of
Yeah.
randomly and become friends. But I feel like that's probably kind of rare in today's day and age.
Yeah.
And I forget whether I was just going to China or just coming back from China, but we met at the food
You
court
were
there.
coming back from China.
Yeah, I just got back from China, so we got to chat about that a little bit. And I might have been going somewhere else, too. It's kind of hard to remember. But we ended up, I think it was like pre-Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather hype. So we started talking about MMA, and you told me you had the fight commentary channel, which I
Yeah.
definitely want to link into this YouTube video when we're all done. So I'll have to get all that information from you and make sure we kind of promote those as well. And that was all inspirational, and we hit it off and played some board games and went to the UFC fights and things, and
Yeah.
and now we're friends for life as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was working at a Chinese tech company at the time, which, by the way, they bought TikTok. So.
Ah,
So, we bonded because we were both in STEM fields. Jordan was more in a STEM field. He's a legit engineer. I
yeah,
was just working with engineers, but so we
right.
were, we could talk on that level too. So
Yeah.
that was another aspect of things. And then just the fact that we were both from the East Coast too, I think that was
Mhm.
another element of it because I spent time in Philadelphia. Jordan grew up in the Pittsburgh area. And
Scranton.
yeah, Scranton area. And
Yeah.
then the final thing I think that was really cool is just like Jordan said, it's hard to just randomly make friends now, especially in a freaking city like LA,
That's
where like
hard.
friends don't even see each other. Friends take
Yeah.
advantage of each other a lot. So the
Yeah.
fact that I just met this dude, he was cool, and we were just
Yeah.
talking about random stuff. It just felt so great. And
Yeah.
the thing is, when I was in college, I would be the one to invite people to my table, but actually Jordan invited me to his table
Yeah.
when the first time we met. We were at the Grand Central Market, I believe it's
Right.
called in LA.
Hmm.
So those were things that just made me realize, okay, Jordan's cool. He's got some of the same wavelength that I have.
Yeah. And I'm still that way. Like I just moved to New Jersey not too long ago, and I
Hmm.
know some people here, some old friends, and it takes a little initiative to get people together, but I'm
Yeah.
willing to take that initiative. It's worth it. So
Yeah.
it's good stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna go over the list of things that I want that we could potentially talk about today. But
Hmm.
I definitely
Hmm.
want to do the Declaration of Interdependence thing first, just because last time we completely missed it, and I want to get it out of the way early. But there's other
Yeah.
fun things we can talk about here too. So I'm gonna hit you with a couple of the things. The Holy Trinity. I did a lot of thinking about the Holy Trinity and some like my conception of it and like how I define some of the terms and like how I find it useful to think about. So that's something to think about. Harry Potter. I don't know what how familiar you are with Harry Potter, but spent a lot of time thinking about that on the trail too. I have some interesting ideas there. I could talk to you about
Wow. Okay.
fractals. I don't know if you know what fractals are.
Um, you might have been the one to tell me about fractals.
Yeah. So we can talk about fractals. I also played a game of Secret Hitler last night, which I can tell you about.
Oh, okay,
It was a lot
all
of
right.
Getting the board games going and all that. Christmas is coming up. Wondering if you have any Christmas plans or Christmas wishes or anything you have going on there. We can talk about that. Mm-hmm. Some new UFC events on the docket. Connor's got a new fight coming up. We got a big fight in a couple weeks. We're finally going to get to see Habib and Ferg, Tony Ferguson. So a lot of stuff to talk about there too, you know. So
yeah, exactly.
But let's still dive into the Declaration of Interdependence first. And actually, when I came on your YouTube channel, that was like a year ago now, I think.
Yeah, it was a year ago.
The first time that I sort of documented what I was thinking about, you know?
Yeah.
And it's been like a year since then, so I've definitely progressed some of those ideas further a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But I kind of want to get your take on it. I mean, you saw what I wrote up. How do you feel about it? Is it clear? Is it anything in particular that you think is interesting or exciting?
I mean, as far as I can tell, I like it. I think my sort of one thing that I want to continue asking you, I think it's something that most people would ask is, what's your sort of plan to get it in people's minds? You got the podcast, you got all this, but are you going to start outreaching to, let's say, congressmen or local people? What's the next step? Because, you know, if you want to overturn the system, it's going to take a lot of people and everything. So I guess that's what I'm really curious about. What is your sort of going from A to B, all the steps there?
Sure. So I think first thing is admitting that I don't fully know, right? Because it's kind of a complicated, and I talked about this on the trail too. It's like and I even mentioned this in kind of the post-declaration write-up, is a loose plan and a grand vision. You know, that's where I'm at right now. But to answer your question more directly, what I'm hoping to do is get some interesting people on the podcast that I have like close or maybe not close, but some sort of personal relationship with, either like work with them or, you know, volunteer with them or know them from social media or whatever, kind of build that as the base to get a few good podcasts going. And then once I have that, start reaching out to some people in local politics and kind of try to get an understanding of what the things that they struggle with, or other people who have put together similar movements or different movements, and kind of progress it all forward, and sort of like a piece at a time, step at a time.
Yeah,
you know?
I see. I see what you're doing. It's like basically the first step. Once you realize, okay, I got to learn. It's just to learn for a while. I like that.
Yeah. And be humble in my approach too. You know, like I remember we laughed about people saying they're going to make viral videos, you know, and it's like, am I expecting this podcast, like you and I, to go viral? No, not really. It'd be cool if it did, right? But ultimately, what I'm trying to do is have interesting conversations with people, get their sense of things, try to see if we can come up with a shared vision of what our future could be, you know, and then build some momentum behind that, get some donations behind that, and push it all forward.
Yeah. I think one thing I really like about what you're doing is you are already thinking about donations. You just started this podcast and you are already getting donations, which is awesome. Like that's the right model, right? To run any type of campaign, like you got to think about the funding immediately. So I think that's a sign that you're going to be sustainable, because I've been on other people's podcasts, and these people, you know, they're like more entrepreneur type of podcasts. So like they would get very, very talented, well-connected executives and people like that. Like I felt like, whoa, I'm an expert along with these other people. But like, so my point in telling us, they would get really connected, really influential people. But eventually, their podcasts, their websites went nowhere because they didn't think about the funding immediately. You know, you get all these people. These people would take some time off their schedule to share information. But then, so what? You're just another website. There's millions of websites. So the fact that you're thinking about funding now, I think, is what makes you a smarter dude than all the other people who've done stuff like this.
Yeah. And I'll progress it forward as the funding dictates too. I mean, right now it's I haven't invested a whole lot in this other than time, you know, just I already had a computer and I'm currently using library space to host the podcast, you know, but like if I get some good donations in there, maybe we build a little bit more of a professional studio, and we have some better equipment, and we can afford to bring people to the podcast by, like, you know, paying for their bus or their flight or whatever it takes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
especially a little bit more high profile people, like we want to get them there. We don't want to be the reason that you can't come on and talk. So that's where I'm at. And then if all of the money comes in, really, I'd really like to build not only a team behind it, but a platform to do all these things. I mentioned the thing like combining the power of social media, like Facebook, like the simplicity of that with the power of things like blockchain and Wikipedia, and like building a platform for democracy. Yeah. Instead of whatever we're doing now that people don't seem exactly thrilled with.
Yeah. Man, I think the quicker you think about building a team, the quicker it's going to be less focus on the micro stuff and more focus on the macro for you. You leave the people who are good at the micro to do the micro. So I think that's a really good idea, because ultimately everyone goes through growth pains. And it's sort of starting to think I really think this comes with the engineering mind you have. So like you're much better at thinking methodically, step by step.
Yeah, you can't put the cart before the horse, It's like,
exactly.
I'm not going to spend all my life savings on this if no one's interested. I'm hoping to get people interested and people to develop a shared vision together. Because I'm also so extroverted that I'm not that interested in doing anything by myself. Like I really want to work with the team. I would love to have a team to support the podcast, to support advertising, to support like marketing efforts, to outreach to potential people in politics or people to come on the podcast, all that stuff, man.
Yeah.
But that takes time and takes money, and I'm hoping to get some support before I push all that.
Yeah.
In that direction. So.
Exactly. One quick aside about politics. I did reach out to Tulsi Gabbard. I left her a message. I'm like, Tulsi, I want to interview you on my channel. So I'll keep you posted if Tulsi gets back to me. I'm sure she's busy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so the next thing I want to dive into is kind of the 3 ideas that I have for something to fit into the Declaration of Interdependence. So I kind of close it with like a call to action, asking people to submit their plans for renovation. Really what I mean by that is like, what could it be like? What it's structured in a certain way with the president and the Congress and the House and the Electoral College and blah, 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 But like, what could it be? If it wasn't so rigidly structured and we had the freedom to take it apart and put it back together, what could it be? And I talked about these ideas with you when I came on your channel. But the first one, and I think ultimately would get almost universal support, would be to get rid of the Electoral College. Talked about that before. I think what is it? 3 of the last like 6 elections for president or something have whoever won the popular vote didn't actually win the Electoral College. Like that in itself is like, what are we doing? Like this is clearly sort of ridiculous,
Yeah.
Not to mention mathematically, it's not equal, right? Like your vote isn't equal if you live in X state versus Y state. They're like not equal, And the arguments that I hear for it don't even really make sense. Like the most common one I hear is like, well, if we got rid of it, then like big states like California would have all the power. And it's like, that's not true at all. I mean, you would be incentivized to get out to vote as an individual, because right now, like California's voted for the Democrat, like whatever the last, I don't know how many times, Yeah. So it's like, why bother? It's never going to go red. I mean, I shouldn't say never, but the chances of it going red are so low that voter turnout is like suppressed as a result. Not suppressed,
exactly.
Word, but like it's not, you're not highly incentivized, Where if the votes were counted individually, it's huge. Every vote counts then,
Yeah. And this might be a more controversial thing that I say. So guys, this is from my mouth, not Jordan's mouth. But if you stop incentivizing smaller states to have unequal amounts of power over bigger states, what's going to happen is people living in areas where the industries are dying, people living in towns that are kind of ghost towns because there's no more mining, no more automobiles, because the world has modernized, they will do what they will naturally do in a more kind of, you could say, free market system. They would move to the bigger cities that have the economic opportunity. So then you would actually be improving the economics and the demographics of America, because people would go where the jobs are. Like any country that's continually to grow and develop, But
Right.
that's controversial because that's telling people in these small towns that they've been living for 6 generations that your town, it's gonna die, so go somewhere else,
Right.
find better opportunity. It's like that emotional thing. It's hard for them to let go.
Yeah. But I think you make a good point, and something that I always kind of look back on is like kind of like Darwin theory of evolution and kind of the survival of the fittest thing. And like anytime we like create policies that push us away from that, I feel like it's just you're playing a dangerous game. You're basically propping up society on things that don't work. You know, it's like instead of part of it failing and dying, like the whole thing's gonna fail and die. And that's way worse.
Think about the sections of America where there's not much industry, not much manufacture left. They don't have the international jobs. So they're literally kind of all depressed in their town, and their town doesn't make much money. So probably it doesn't make much tax revenue. And because the town's not a beacon of hope and opportunity economically, they're probably not getting access to the best foods either. So it's like a perpetual cycle of poverty and unhealthfulness.
Right. Leads to poverty, leads to obesity, leads to substance abuse, leads to crime.
Yeah.
So cool. So in general, with the first piece of getting rid of the Electoral College, replacing it with the just standard popular vote, what do you think? Yay, nay? Would you vote yes or no?
I would say yay, and the reason I had to bring up that point that might be controversial is because I used to not agree with Jordan about this. I used to really see the Electoral College. I used to really be like, but then I would say the exact argument Jordan was saying. I'd be like, but it gives the bigger states more power, and then they'll bully around all the states that don't have population. But then I realized that's a problem of the fact that the United States has this like federalism. We have layers and layers of government, which is cool, but it doesn't adjust to how the economy and how demographics change. So like maybe federalism could work, but it's almost like the states have to be rewritten. The states have to be redrawn with boundaries every like 20 years. So like that's kind of hard in itself. And then I just realized maybe there is a case for popular vote, especially knowing that it will incentivize people to potentially leave places that aren't the best for developing and et cetera. So I am in favor of that now.
Yeah, just the math is silly too. Like, for example, if you live in, I don't know, New York, for example, and like only one person comes out to vote and they vote for the red team. And then you have like California and like 100% of people come out to vote and they vote for the blue team, Well, New York still gets, it's basically the way the math works is it's like 100% of the population voted for red and 100%. But that's not what happened.
Yeah.
Like maybe people didn't care. Maybe they weren't incentivized to vote or whatever in the state of New York. But like, I don't know. It just seems like outdated. It was created when communication and travel were a lot more difficult. And we're just, that world is 200 years old now.
Yeah.
And it's time for an update. So that's how I feel about that one.
And on top of all that, so when I was doing research, just looking at history and stuff like that, I realized that so many of those people that were selected to be your electors in the Electoral College, they would kind of sometimes protest and not even vote the way their state voted.
Right.
So like one election, some dude cast the first vote for a woman. She wasn't even running, but he just cast a vote for a woman. He's like, I want a woman to get a vote. And then during the Trump election, Trump versus Hillary, some dude casted, so the first Native American ever got a vote from an elector. So it's like these people, just for personal reasons, for milestone reasons, for protest reasons, will literally just go against their whole state. The one thing they're supposed to do as electors, they'll be like, I don't care. Yeah. And at worst, they'll get a $10,000 fine. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? You mess with our democracy and you get a $10,000 fine.
Which is probably like nothing to them anyway. I don't know who these people are. But
they calculated it, right? They're rational to make that big a decision. They're going to be rational about it, or they're not going to be rational. But the point is they can afford that fine.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into the next one then. And this is one I also talked about with you in the past, is making ranked choice voting the default voting system. So rather than the winner-take-all system that we have now, we replace that with like ranked choice voting. So there's a couple reasons why I think that's better. One is it would give some third-party candidates a fighting chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now it's set up where, I don't know, let's say whoever the third-party candidate is more liberal than they are conservative, right? So you vote. Let's say you vote for them. Well, people argue that's sort of a wasted vote because you should have voted for the Democratic candidate because now it's like, it's a wasted vote, right?
Yeah.
But if we replaced it with ranked choice voting, you could still vote for your favorite candidate and list your second favorite, third favorite, fourth favorite, down to however, I don't know how many make sense, maybe 4, I don't know. So it kind of alleviates some of that. It would really give these other people a chance that don't identify with either the red team or the blue team, And I feel that way too. I've always kind of felt trapped in the middle. Some things I'm leaning a little bit more right, some things I lean a little bit more left, and kind of discouraging when third party really doesn't have much of a chance, especially the higher you go up the political food chain, So that's one reason for sure. Before I get into the next thing, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that piece of it.
I think back when we were in high school and learning about American history and politics, the reason they would justify a two-party system is that, you see, what the thing about the two-party system is it always creates compromise. And the thing is, all the radical ideas will eventually get mellowed out and incorporated into whatever party that they're closer to, right? That was the thought.
Yeah.
But I think they are not up to date with how the world is now with the internet and the fact that you can create micro communities that now can become big communities of groupthink. And so the two-party system, I think, is kind of getting outdated. And if it still served the consequence, so maybe I'm using a consequential argument, if it's still serving the consequence of making society more kind of middle ground, making politics more middle ground, then I think there's a reason for it. But it doesn't seem to be doing that anymore.
Yeah, it seems like it's almost doing the opposite thing, right?
It's pulling everyone apart.
Like, hey, you have to pick a team. And like, your team thinks this, and you better think that too if you're on that team. It's like, that's not free thought.
Yeah.
That's like fascism or something, And it creates sort of like isolation in the middle too. If you kind of feel like how I feel, kind of trapped in the middle. It's like, I don't know. Like, people who I talk to who are more conservative think I'm like liberal, and people who are liberal think I'm conservative. It's like, I'm just in the middle, guys. I'm like just trying to figure it out and be open-minded and progress all this forward in a way that's useful, Like, maybe not left, maybe not right, maybe forward together, would be a better solution,
And like you say, I think ranked choice voting would give more nuance, because you're not just thinking about reaching that one group. You're thinking about, okay, but what if I don't get voted for by that group? What other groups could I pick up? So it basically forces you to kind of do what our two-party system was supposed to do, which is like build coalitions.
Right. And maybe worst case scenario, some of these third-party people that have more of a fighting chance, they come with some good ideas and they get adopted by one of the parties,
Yeah, exactly. It's more likely under a ranked voting system for one of the major parties to adopt some of those third-party ideas, because they have to think beyond just their voter base.
Right. And I think another main problem with the way it's set up now with the winner-take-all that I think ranked choice voting would help alleviate is the focus is so much on the differences with our current setup. It's like, well, you think this, and I think this, and that, therefore we're on separate teams. And it's like, what about what we agree on?
Yeah.
What do we agree on? What if we start there? It's like, I probably 80% of people probably agree on 80% of things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. We can do a lot with that,
Yeah.
But instead, the way it's set up now is like you're so driven to focus on the differences and to paint your opponent as the enemy and like something that we can't deal with and tolerate. Where if it was ranked choice voting, you and I could run a joint campaign together and say like, this is what I believe, and I really appreciate your vote. And if I would also appreciate if you list Jerry as your second choice, because he and I are aligned on like 90% of things,
Yeah.
And that way we can pool campaign funds, and we can decide of the other candidates who we're most aligned with. I just think it would be better,
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a math hurdle to think about, because instead of just being like, oh, like we'll just vote for one person, it's like because you're voting for multiple people. But that's kind of good, right? I mean, if you were to list like, I don't know, your favorite albums of all time, like you wouldn't want to just pick one, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, this is like my first choice, and this is like my 9 other choices, you know?
Yeah.
And it creates a better picture of who you support and why you support them and all that too. So
Yeah.
I would love to see that. And I personally, I need to do a little bit more research on the places where it's already been implemented. I'm pretty sure, like in Berkeley, it's been done, California, as well as maybe Maine too. I need to double check some of that and like kind of see how it's worked, see if it's led to outcomes that I think it would lead to, or kind of just kind of get an update on what it looks like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, anything else on that piece before we jump to the next one?
I think for everyone watching, ranked choice voting is just something that like everyone should look at more. It's a really cool idea, and it's something that honestly I wish we started in elementary school, middle school, high school, etc. The only time I had any sort of ranked choice voting was remember outdoor ed? Did you have outdoor ed?
Is this like in high school or college?
This is in middle school. So it was a week. Well, by the time I was in middle school, you know, society's more coddling. So instead of a week, it was only 3 days where you would go camping with your whole school, your whole sixth grade class.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we had a ranked choice voting system for who we wanted to be in our cabin. So it's like you listed your first choice, your second choice, your third choice, and then everyone did it. And then they would have, honestly, I don't even think the computers were advanced enough. So they probably had a bunch of humans like figure it out.
Sure.
But that was the only time I experienced ranked choice voting. And it was quite a funny system because what happened was it did force coalitions together. Like my cabin was the funniest cabin. We had like my nerdy friends, and then we had all the ghetto kids, and we were in a cabin together. Yeah. So, you know, like that's what ranked choice does, right? It forces people but it worked out. Like we all got along. None of us got into fights or anything.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So probably what happened was like one of the ghetto kids might have put me, you know, on the bottom of their list, but I was on their list or something. Maybe one of my friends who was friends with one of the ghetto kids, like put one of them in the bottom, you know, right? So that's how the cabins became like that. Yeah. But like that's the beauty of ranked choice voting is that it yields these cool results that forces like compromise and coalitions together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would be really useful, and I think it would. It's pretty simple too. I mean, compared to some of the legislation that comes out, I mean, this wouldn't be that complicated. We're just basically replacing standard kind of winner take all with ranked choice voting. You set up some system where X number is the limit, and you don't have to fill them all, but you can fill them all. And I think it would just be better all around.
Yeah.
And then before I get into the new Senate piece, which I've also talked to you about on your channel, I also want to kind of bring this to something else I've been thinking about with, like, for example, primary elections in Pennsylvania. You have to be registered under that party in order to vote in that party's primary election, which from one angle makes sense, right? Because you wouldn't want like Republicans, for example, voting in the Democratic primary and like voting for like the biggest loser in the group, you know, I get that part of it, right? But it's also like almost like it feels unconstitutional to create any laws or policies that support one of the main two political parties. I think any laws that do that should be declared unconstitutional. And if I had a team of lawyers behind me, we would push some of that forward and see what we could do, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's just so unfair, you know?
Yeah. It's so unfair because the two-party system, the two parties have money, so they can keep spending more money than any kind of third party, right? So that's why certain cable networks lean towards a certain party, and then as a third party, you're mentioning the primaries, but like in general, it's harder to get information out. And like if I had a team of lawyers like you, I would basically separate the information from the money always. So like if MSNBC or the Democratic Party, let's say, wanted to have a YouTube channel or a Facebook page, sure, but like they cannot do any kind of money manipulation, so they couldn't pay for ads or do any of that because they have more money to spend on ads. So that's just unfair.
Yeah. Okay. The next piece is what I've been calling the new Senate. So I would say of the other two, I would say this one I'm probably less confident about in terms of like that it would for sure be a good idea. Like ranked choice voting I think would be awesome, and getting rid of the Electoral College I think would be awesome. This one is a little trickier, and I'm not 100% confident in it, but I think it could be revolutionary too, though. So, and I've talked about this on your channel previously, but I just kind of want to give you an update of like where I'm at with it.
Okay.
So the same kind of arguments that I made for getting rid of Electoral College, basically favoring small states sort of arbitrarily, right? You could say the same thing about the Senate. You know, the fact that the state of Wyoming has 2 senators, as does the state of California, when the population is what, like, I don't even know, like certainly probably more than 10 times as much, you know?
Yeah.
It's sort of ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So instead, what I would like to do is replace that form of the Senate with sort of a committee of experts that are self-elected by the same experts. So just to kind of unpack that a little bit. We would create categories of competency, and let's just say we can make 100 of them. That way we have the same number of senators now that we do then. 100 categories of competency. This could be like, you know, teachers or nurses or, you know, ex-military or, you know, certain types of engineers, whatever. You create a category that accurately represents the people, not from their geographic location, but from their knowledge, what they understand about the world, and like what they've gone through and what they like. So you create these categories, you know, and then in order to vote in that category, you have to meet some threshold of competency in that category. So like for nursing, for example, in order to vote in the nursing category for the nurse that you think should represent you in the new Senate, you have to have like a nursing degree or like a certain number of years of experience. And they could even self-regulate that too. You know, like I could tell them what to do and what to set the bar at. You know, they could probably self-regulate it so the bar was, you know, high enough to get into that, like you've proven that you actually know what you're talking about, but not like so high that it like limits the number of people that could get in there, you know? So one of the, I've pitched this to a couple different people, more than a couple of different people over the past year or so. And one of the common kind of objections that I get is it sort of favors people with, what's the word I'm looking for? Privilege.
Yeah. People with prior resources to be able to obtain or easier obtain some of those knowledge criteria.
And that's definitely true. I mean, you can't negate that point. Like, it's definitely a point to be made. However, I think you can do things to kind of counterbalance it a little bit. So the one thing that I would recommend doing is creating some baseline categories that almost anyone can get into. Yeah. So for example, on your 18th birthday, when you're eligible to vote, you're automatically enrolled in what I've been calling like category 0. You know, like everyone's in that category if you want to be in it. So and you could even make that person, whoever wins that part of the election, the president of the Senate, you know, which I know that's the vice president right now, but there's no reason that needs to stay there anyway. Or maybe they're the vice president too. I don't know, you know, but anyway, so that would be category 0. You can call it category 1, but for me, it's like category 0 makes more sense because it's like automatic, you know, you're in that one. And then the second category, category 1, would be something that you're enrolled into upon high school graduation or equivalent, you know, like proving some sort of baseline level of education, that you're not a complete moron, that you've been able to, you know, study and learn and understand the world at least a little bit enough to participate in that category, you know? And then from there, it kind of goes in all sorts of different directions depending on where you take your life, you know? If you know, decide to go to school for this, or you decide to go to trade school for that, or you decide to pursue a career in law or law enforcement, you know, and we can create these categories. And then that way you actually know what you're talking about when you're voting for that person. you know? If so, for example, my background is in energy and engineering and sort of sustainability. So maybe I would be eligible to participate in categories related to that. And when it came to a person that was running to be the senator of, let's say, the energy policy category, right? Like I would understand the complexity of the energy system, you know? Like I understand like where oil comes from and how it's processed. You know, I understand how coal is dug out of the ground and like the impact of burning fossil fuels. And I understand the complications of like investing in renewable energy over the long term and like all those things, electric car, natural gas, like all that stuff. Like I actually understand it. Maybe not like 100%. I mean, I don't know if anybody does 100%, but when it came to picking somebody to represent me on my behalf in the Senate, I would actually know what they were talking about because I know what I'm talking about, you know? And like imagine that, like a nurse, I think is a good example. Imagine having a nurse as a senator speaking in front of the Senate on behalf of policy related to, you know, medicine, you know, and actually having a say and like no one policy impacts one group anyway. You know, any policy they're going to make is going to impact insurance companies and medical professionals and, you know, ambulance drivers and all this stuff, you know? So getting a more complete picture of that and having the technical expertise there at the table to review the policy, I think would be outstanding, you know? Not to mention that the Senate, the way it's structured right now, is a duplication of the House anyway, you know? It's on where you live. They represent you based on your locale. The only difference is that they're more powerful. There's less of them, you know? No, like the number of people that they represent on average is a lot higher, you know? So it's definitely a lot more complicated, and I certainly don't have it all like hashed out, but I think it could be really, really exciting and really useful and a better way to do to create laws and policies.
Yeah. There is that argument that because senators, there's fewer of them per state, the consequence of it is that it makes the senatorial race slightly more competitive because it's not like the House where they have their own districts, they're tight with their districts. So unless redistricting happens, the House is a more stable lower branch of the Congress than the Senate is. So the one current argument for having direct election of senators, 2 per state, is that it's those senators, they're more powerful, they're in there for longer, but they're also slightly more accountable for the long term than just to their districts. But then, you know, if you get rid of a lot of this electoral college system thing, then you wouldn't have, you know, the problem wouldn't even be there, right? So you wouldn't then need that solution because the problem wouldn't be there.
Right. And I don't know what the number is, right? But how many people, like percentage-wise, of Americans could name both of their senators and their local representative?
Yeah. I can't. I don't know who my councilman is in this area, and I don't know who my local representative is.
You're a reasonably intelligent person, you know? So I'd imagine that the number is pretty low. So if you brought this new Senate in, you'd be more incentivized to know your House representative. They're your only local representative. So like if you have a local issue, you better talk to them because they're the one that's got your back or supposed to have your back anyway, you know? And then everything else would be industry specific. So like, you know, like if you're in XYZ industry, you know who the top people are in that industry and why they're respected or where they've misstepped or whatever, you know, you're like, you're fluent in all that. It's come natural to you because you're in that world every day working your job or whatever, you know? I think it'd be really cool. And like, I don't know what the 100 categories would be. You'd have to really put a group of smart people together to really create it and craft it so it really reflects the interests of the people. But I think like you can do lots of things. I mean, like people that work in childcare, you know, whether that's you know, preschool or you run like a daycare or, you know, you're a stay-at-home parent with lots of kids or I don't know, you can just like whatever, you know, you're looking out for the youth, you know? And that's super important. You know?
And I think if you reduce the redundancy of the Senate, kind of basically doing the same as the House, I think what ends up happening is people start, if they really have problems and they need government to help, they'll go to their local they'll go to their state. Because right now it's like, okay, oh, I have a problem. Let's say you have a problem with the IRS or something. Oh, let's write to my congressman and let's write to my senator. But then it's like maybe in the future what happens is since the senators are industry specific, then you stop bothering your senator about those issues and instead you write to, let's say, your state representative about this. Because so my ultimate vision is that the state becomes a little bit more powerful than it is right now. Because right now the federal dominates too much. It becomes more localized.
Yeah.
So you go to your state because they're closer to you. They should know you better. They should have more power. But, there's various historical reasons why the federal government became much more powerful than the states. Some of it, unfortunately, was due to segregation and racism and how the federal government had to force the states to desegregate and stuff like that. But I hope we're past that now. So maybe it's time to give like this real federalism, like states and local, et cetera, having actual power, like giving that more of a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And then another common kind of objection that I hear related to this is like, you're basically putting industry professionals in charge, and it's like kind of the opposite maybe what we want to do when people say like, get money out of politics. And it's like, yeah, you do sort of want to get money out of politics, but it's also like, can you? Is that even possible? Like making policies that affect industry, right, and that affect people, and like people want those policies to benefit them, and benefit their family and their community, right? And they're going to support that with whatever means they have, which is either time, money, effort, whatever,
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you physically can get money out of politics, right? It's always going to be, they're married together, right? They're sort of like opposite sides of the same coin, right? It's like we need politics to govern ourselves, and we need industry so we have resources to live, So instead of getting money out of politics, I'd say bring the money front and center,
Yeah, and make it more even playing field, which looks like what both of us agree with. We both want more industries to be represented. We want people to have more access, and I think that's what all this does.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at on that. What do you think? Any other comments on it? Questions on it?
I think there should be a little bit more thought about the money in politics. I think that's very tricky.
Yeah,
and I do see what you said, taking the devil's advocate about the people who are saying, well, aren't we supposed to get money out of politics? And I think if I'm going to anticipate resistance, probably that's going to be a big one. People are definitely going to really want to hear more justification, because the gut feeling is, man, you really need to get money out of politics for sort of the little people to be able to stand up. But then how would you ever, right?
How can you?
Yeah, how could you? Like they kind of were trying to prevent companies from doing too much, and then I think they were trying to prevent individuals from doing too much, and that's how super PACs formed.
Right.
And so it's like there's always a way around laws. That's another thing.
Yeah, it's always loopholes, especially when you got top lawyers working for you. You can always kind of see how the law is written and interpret it however makes sense, and find a way around it. So it's tricky.
Exactly.
But I want to add one more part here before we kind of wrap this piece of it up. But I think it makes sense too. Back to the piece about it's sort of favoring the privileged, people with expertise. It's like on one hand, like that's sort of a good thing. Like we don't necessarily want to favor the privileged per se, but we do want to favor and incentivize people to gain expertise. Yeah. We also don't want to limit their number of representatives right now. So like right now you have 2 senators that are kind of working on your behalf, right? So with the system I talked about, Category 0 and Category 1, we already get you to 2 senators after you graduate high school or equivalent.
Yeah.
You're already there. And then you can build on that based on your expertise.
Yeah.
Maybe cap it at some number. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 6. Like you can't go past that. Like at a certain point, let's say you have your experience in all these different things and you pass thresholds for all these different categories, you ultimately have to choose which ones are most important to you. Yeah. And put in that one.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number would be, but it would be kind of silly for one person to be able to vote in all categories,
Yeah, one person has 100.
Right. Another person has 2. That's not really fair. But if one person has 2 and another person has 5, and that other person that has 5 has really proven themselves in several industries, then I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I'm thinking a way to kind of even a playing field. This could be controversial too, but I see reasons for it is, let's say if you grew up in very dire circumstances or grew up in very unprivileged circumstances, maybe there's like a special category for you, like someone who would represent you.
Absolutely.
There. So that would like even out the playing field a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. I don't know what it would be. You'd have to be really careful with creating it, but you definitely create a category that represents the underrepresented.
Exactly. Because you don't want people to be incentivized then to not work hard or not educate themselves. Just, but I'm still going to get this representative.
Right.
Yeah.
And that way that person, whoever that would be or whatever that category would be, would go to bat for the people who like do have it hard, who maybe don't have a super high IQ or are physically or mentally disabled in some way or whatever. Like, they can't do certain things that other people can do, but we still need them to be represented. They're still valuable. They're still a person,
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. So that's the Declaration of Interdependence and a couple of the ideas I have so far. Do you have anything that you think that with using your creative mind, given the structure of things, is there anything that, to use the analogy I used in the Declaration, any renovations to our house that you see would be good ideas?
Ultimately, I just think they need to clarify more of sort of the boundaries between the federal government and the state and local. Because what would happen was, in the old days, they would take the Interstate Commerce Clause and they would take the Necessary and Proper Clause and they would just interpret it for every law that would start chipping away at state and local sovereignty. Mm-hmm. And we're still doing that, right? We're still using vague parts of the Constitution to justify whatever. I mean, Obamacare was passed, and it was actually being challenged because people were trying to take vague clauses of the Constitution to be like, okay, no, it actually means you can't do Obamacare. No, it means you can do Obamacare. So, like you said, laws are written to be bypassed or whatever. That's the unfortunate part of the human mind. But then you can always try to clarify it more, and there's probably updates that they need to make.
Yeah. And I think what I extract from that is like simplicity. The fact that it's so complicated that you need a team of lawyers to figure out the loopholes to navigate the whole thing, like, it doesn't need to be that way. Like, if we can simplify the whole thing so there's not so many loopholes and it's pretty straightforward and everyone understands the rules of the game,
Yeah.
That's something that for me is really important, is because I looked at things strategically, almost like game theory, and like the game needs to be fair, and you can't, maybe can't's not the right word, but I don't think we should be changing the rules like mid-game either. Like if you're changing the rules, like, it's not fair to punish people who have won under the set of rules. So you got to be really careful with all that. But it's tricky. It's gonna require some balance.
It is tricky, and I think part of the reason why there's two main reasons why our Constitution is like that. One was we were a grand experiment, man. It's not like they really knew what they were doing, right? So they kept it vague because they didn't really know what they're doing. Right. Second of all, because they didn't know what they were doing, they don't want to be blamed. So they're like, let's leave it to future generations to interpret us. We don't want to be like, oh yeah, it was his fault. He wrote that and our country fell. So, but I think now we have more case studies in the world. So there's more evidence-based solutions to clarify and simplify languages that are vague.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point you make, though, about kind of unintended consequences of certain policies and being intelligent enough to build in flexibility. When things change, you can change this. It's not set in stone. It's not,
Yeah. One thing I will add.
Go ahead.
Something for all viewers to think about is think about the role of our judiciary branch too, because originally the judiciary branch wasn't supposed to make laws or strike down laws. All they were supposed to do was interpret the laws. So it's not like they could say, I disagree with the law. It's like, okay, the law's passed, here's the interpretation. That's what the judiciary branch was. But of course we had that famous case where the head of the chief justice didn't want to piss off either party, so he invented judicial review to be like, I'm not going to piss you off because this law was unconstitutional. So it's not about my interpretation of the law to piss off one of you. It's the law itself should exist, so I'm not pissing off every one of you. So he invented a law. He invented a power for the judicial branch that now is used constantly, but it didn't officially exist within the language of, you could say maybe within the context of the Constitution, but within the language, there was no judicial review. So that's something for audiences to think about. How powerful should our judicial branch be? Should they be able to kind of like strike down abortion laws because, yeah, it's that's not what the Constitution says, therefore I'm legislating? Or should they kind of step back a little, be like, okay, I can't tell Congress what laws pass, but once it's passed, it's in our hands to interpret based on, what people fight about and, go to court with each other about. So that's something to think about too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting too that like to have these legislative, not legislative branches, but branches of government, but they don't all have equal teeth.
Yeah.
You know? Like the executive branch, even though they don't create laws or interpret laws, they're the ones with all the teeth.
Yeah.
So when it comes time to enforce something or not enforce something, they're the only ones that have any really power over that. And I'm certainly not necessarily advocating to give like the judicial branch or the legislative branch like any sort of like, police force to enforce what they're saying. I don't know if that's necessarily the right solution, but it is sort of an unequal power dynamic, and it seems like it's led to the executive branch to be more powerful, relatively speaking, to the other two. And that seems a little bit out of balance.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Executive orders or something to think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know about the Constitution, the president, in his own unilateral capacity, can be the chief of our army, chief of our military. So in times of war, he can, act that way. But like just randomly issuing an executive order, aka issuing a law without Congress, I don't think that's technically allowed. Well,
right.
That's one of those powers that got interpreted, right? Just like
right.
judicial review for the judiciary branch.
Right. And then to further complicate matters, like if the president is allowed to do things like that during time of war, well, then they just create a perpetual state of war.
Yeah.
Which is what they've done, sort of, Like we've been at war for the last 18 years minimum, not to mention all the other activities we've been involved in prior to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, it's loophole. It's like, oh, you can't do that unless there's time of war. It's like, all right, we'll just create a war then.
Yeah.
And it's like done. So
or you could say there's threat of a war. So as a president, okay, I think it's time for me to act unilaterally, right? There's threat of terrorists. Okay, I'm going to start banning people, etc.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah. And one last thing I will present to viewers, something to think about. This is an intent argument because the Constitution doesn't say exactly, but the presidential veto, according to some historical scholars, the intent of it was only for constitutionality. Because again, the president's the executive branch. They're the executors. They're not legislators. What that means is Congress passes whatever freaking laws because they represent the people. The president only executes the law. The president, all his branch, they're the executors. Now, why did they put the veto according to the intent argument? Because you had to have a safeguard if the legislative branch passed an unconstitutional law. As part of the executive branch, you had to make sure you weren't executing a law that was unconstitutional. That's what the veto was supposed to be. But because it wasn't written clearly, or maybe, some people disagree with it, and so, whatever the case, it became a legislative tool. So the president's like, no, I veto this because I don't like the policy. Not because the policy is unconstitutional, but I don't like the policy. Or they'll threaten to veto. I'm going to veto this if you don't put this in. So the president gets to legislate. That wasn't the point of the veto. And because the president started using the veto for legislative purposes, that gave the judiciary branch more justification to do judicial review, to review the unconstitutionality of a law when it wasn't never supposed to have that right. You see what happened there?
Right. I think it's knocked up.
The federal government wasn't supposed to be as powerful as it was because our founding fathers, there's debate about this. Some of them really wanted a powerful federal government, but a lot of them really wanted a more federalist, a more kind of states had a lot of rights that the federal government couldn't tramp on it. So they wanted that. But, you have power, you want more power, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of those powers that weren't prescribed for the federal government, the national government got interpreted in. Just things to think about for viewers. Like I've studied this stuff before, so like these are things that I'm glad I have a platform to express. I don't even think I've told Jordan about this stuff before, but the federal government, the national government, was never meant to be as powerful as it is, and a lot of the interpretation of its powers are built on such flimsy foundations. And you could argue that a lot of my interpretations of a limited government are also built on flimsy foundations, because at the end of the day, we can't go back in time and be like, what percentage of Americans, what percentage of our founding fathers really wanted a limited government, right? We're just interpreting based on written records and stuff like that, and our own biases.
Yeah, our own biases too. Yeah, it's good stuff, huh?
Yeah. So think about, for every viewer, if I'm giving you things to think about, the renovations to think about the executive branch too. Think about the veto that I talked about. Think about the judiciary branch. Think about judicial review. Think about all that stuff. Read up, do some research, see if they were meant to be what they are today.
Right. And really with the goal of thinking about how we might structure it better.
Yeah.
Because that's really how I feel. Is like criticism is good only as far as it's kind of teamed with or paired with an alternate solution. You know, it's like, get rid of this, and it's like, replace it with what?
Yeah.
Like, you need to have that too, or else it's like we're not going to listen to you anyway.
Exactly.
Okay, so we did an hour almost on these on the Declaration of Interdependence and some of those things. So that was pretty cool. I think you want to have some fun and talk about some other goofy things for a little while?
Yeah, sure. Let's devote about like 20 minutes to some goofy stuff.
Sounds good. So I'm going to let you pick. I'm going to run some of the things back to you, and I'll let you pick whatever you want. So we got the Holy Trinity. We got Harry Potter. We got fractals. We got the Secret Hitler game we played last night. Christmas. We can talk about Christmas, and we can talk about UFC.
I think I really want to learn about fractals. I don't know what fractals are, so I want to do that. And then I think Harry Potter, Holy Trinity, and Secret Hitler. Those are great ones to talk about. Because I would, if it's okay with you, I would start with Secret Hitler, just because I have been doing board games again with the same people. Some of them are different now because I live in Santa Monica, so a lot of the people that lived in like the Asian parts of LA are probably not going to come. But like our bro Chris is still part of the group, and Sashi's still there. So,
what up, Chris?
I know. So like I'm still doing board games, and we were talking about all the board games that you used to have and stuff like that. So yes, please talk about Secret Hitler.
So Chris mailed them all to me from LA or from Torrance or wherever the hell he lives. So I just recently got them back, and I brought Secret Hitler to Thanksgiving and played with my family. So that was a riot. Lot of fun. I think I was a fascist like every time, I think. And it was pretty good. My mom was a little too inebriated to play properly. Sorry, Mom, you're probably going to watch this. But so other than that, though, it was a real riot. And then I played last night, too, with Raven's family. Her brother and his new wife came over, so we had 8 of us, and we played again. And I was Secret Hitler again.
Wow.
And we ended up winning to it's tricky when you're Secret Hitler because you don't know who the other fascists are, right? So you kind of got to play it like super cool,
Yeah.
But it worked out good. They elected me chancellor after we had like 4 other fascist policies enabled. So it was a pretty good game. I'm looking forward to. It's good to have them all back, man. It's such a fun pastime, and I don't have like a huge group of friends here in Jersey, but I'm going to start with the friends that I do have, kind of inviting people out and getting together to play some games. I think it's like a really good way to be social in a group rather than just like sitting around watching TV or like going eating food and spending money on drinks and stuff. It's like a really like low cost, good fun, healthy fun.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Did you find any new insights into the strategy of the game or anything like that?
Well, when I played with my with my family there over Thanksgiving. I was in a position at the beginning of the game where I could have laid down, and I was a fascist both times. I could have laid down a fascist or a liberal tile, and like if you lay down that fascist tile, you're either making yourself like an enemy or you're creating an enemy like right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But like instead, I chose the strategy of like building trust instead. So I played a liberal tile, and then my brother like immediately trusted me. He's like, well, I know you're good because so like even though I was like not, so I think you did that trick to me once upon a time, and so I did it back to him, and it totally worked. And then I got him back too as the game progressed a little further. I like picked him as chancellor or whatever because I was like, oh, I trust him,
Mm-hmm.
But then when I gave him the 2 tiles, and he laid down a fascist card, I made the claim. I was like, I gave him a liberal. I was like, he's bad. I can't believe it. And then I also, at the time, had the presidential power to assassinate a player.
Oh.
So I was like, well, I got to kill him. I know he's fascist. So it was like, bang. It was like, boom, boom, boom. Like, it all happened really quick. And he's like, And then everyone made fun of my acting because I was like, oh, my God, I can't believe it. Even though I was like clearly the one that was lying,
I see.
A real riot. Yeah. So that's hopefully I can get together this weekend or next weekend or sometime in the future with some more people to play some more games. Like Chris set up the Dominion real nice too. It's like he's put it in like this really nice black case and everything.
Yep.
I was like, oh, man, he's the best, isn't he?
Yeah,
Love
he
that
is.
guy.
We on our end here, we started playing this game called Saboteur. It's a lot like Secret Hitler, but instead of trying to pass laws, you're trying to build a road to the treasure. So your fascists are like your saboteurs, and then your liberals, your good guys, are like your regular dwarves that are trying to build the road. So you have different ways you can like build the road wrong so it doesn't lead to the treasure. You could blow up roads. You can prevent players from playing. So it's like Secret Hitler, but like in a more fantasy type of way. It's really funny. And we played 4 games or 5 games, and every single time there were like 8 to 9 players. 4 games and 5 games, every time Chris and I were the bad guys, were the saboteurs. So, like, I sent Chris an email because I thought about maybe even doing a video on this because it's a really fun combinations, factorial type of like video. But, like, what was the percentage of the two of us getting the bad guy every single time, and all those games? It was kind of rare. It was really funny.
Pretty low. It's like, I'd imagine that, I don't know how many, so if you had 9 people, how many people were the saboteurs? Like 3?
There were only 2 or 3.
And then the second one's even more rare. And then for it to be the other person, you're already, even for it to happen one time is like what? 1/3 times 2/9. That's a pretty low number already. And that's only one time. And then you do that on top of itself 3 times for it to happen 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
It's pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
But hey, the card's got to end up somewhere too. So it's like, even though it's like unlikely, it's like something's got to happen by the definition of the game, So
yeah. And then there's a game that one day when you come back, we'll have to teach you. But Chris, Sashi, and I modified this Chinese card game, and we added elements of like American gambling into it. So like it's like a East-West hybrid game. It's really funny.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know when I'm going to get out there to visit you guys again, but I want to see some friendly faces from Los Angeles, You, Chris, and some of my old coworkers and old friends and stuff. Would be really cool to make that happen.
Yeah.
Who knows when, but eventually.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to hear about fractals? Or you want to hear about Harry Potter?
I want to. I definitely want to hear your Holy Trinity thing, and then fractals. So if we don't get to Harry Potter, it's okay. But in an ideal world, I want to get to all 3.
All right. So which one do you want next? Then the Trinity.
Holy Trinity. I really want to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. So I don't know if you watched the last podcast that I did with Prometheus, but we talked a lot about vernacular. I think I said the word like 10 times in the podcast because he kept getting ahead, and I was like, we got to back up. We got to define some terms here. And that's like really what it's like, defining terms, because people throw the word like God around so loosely, and it's like, how do we know we're even talking about the same thing? Yeah. So when I was hiking, I really started thinking about this, and the different way that people use the word God and like what it really means, Yeah. And I was listening to some Jordan Peterson's podcasts, and definitely there's definitely lots of influence in what I'm about to say from him and some of his biblical lectures, especially some of the stuff on Christ and stuff. But okay, so here's kind of how it lays out. So you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? So it's basically past, present, future. Is kind of one way to think about it. God the Father represents like everything that's ever happened leading up to this present moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So like when people say like God created everything, like my interpretation of that is like God the Father created everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is like not one single entity, but like everything that's ever been anything that's made a decision or did anything has contributed to this total sum of God the Father. So you think about this as like the sum of everything preceding this moment, which includes the sum of all suffering, the sum of all heroic acts, the sum of all lying and honesty and like whatever, and that includes like you can think of like really specific examples too. You could think about like the mother who like laid her life on the line to like save her young children. That's part of God the Father. Like she did that, she made that sacrifice and like maybe lost her life as a result, and those kids lived on to create a future. Or it's like you can think of more concrete examples like the road that you drive on, or the building that you're standing in. Like you didn't build that building. You don't even know who built that building, but it's there. It's like part of all of the good things that we've inherited, And that doesn't mean everything that we've inherited is good either, It's like a lot of what we've inherited needs to be corrected, And that's like another definite, and this goes back to Peterson, like when he talks about like some of the Egyptian stories and like, I forget the name of the god, but he's blind and dead. And that's God the Father is blind and dead. Like he's not here. Like whatever you did, for example, let's say yesterday you decided that you had to dig a hole, that was like what you needed to do that day is dig this hole, Well, then today you wake up and you realize that like, oh, I actually didn't need to dig that hole. I actually need to fill that hole back in, Like you from yesterday isn't there to tell you, He's not there. He can't see today. He can't see right now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So instead, that kind of progresses to the next one, which I think is the Holy Spirit. So that's like present moment. You can think of that about like you right now and like all of us right now in this present moment. And like, what are you supposed to do in this present moment? You're supposed to act out the hero. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make the right sacrifices in the present moment to like pay homage to God the Father for all of the sacrifices they made for us, but also not like overvalue some of the things they've done for us. Like, if they hand us a system that's corrupt and broken, well, then it's our responsibility to fix it, And then kind of moving forward, God the Son is more feminine. It's the future. It's the helpless child, It's the vulnerable pregnant mother, Because that's sort of what the future is, right? If we don't right now in the present moment make necessary sacrifices and act out the hero, then we're not leaving a world for the future that's manageable, So you can kind of marry all these together and like helps, for me anyway, helps me sort of understand my role. It's like I've inherited what God the Father gave me, which includes everything, And my job right now is to act out the hero like some parts of God the Father did to make the future better. To take care of myself now, to take care of myself in the future, to take care of my family and my future family, you know what I mean? Like, It's almost like, you can think of it as like a line, like a time, like in math or science where you'd have like the line and it represents time. And we're at that focal point where the lines cross, and behind us is the past and ahead of us is the future, And we've also kind of given this opportunity. You can kind of place that center of that cross, like right at your mind's eye. You put it right there and like imagine you're at that point, that present moment in time, and like moving forward, because really forward is the only direction you can go, So you kind of are faced with this choice of like, do I want to drive this all down into like hell and make everything worse and make life miserable for future generations, or do I want to lift it up, make necessary sacrifices, bear a burden, make be a good part of God the Father, So when people look back and think about, oh, what did this person do? Did they make the world better? Did they make the world? Hopefully they look back and say, he improved.
Yeah.
Made an improvement,
Wow.
lift it up, bear their burden to lift it all up, and it's all sort of symbolic in like the Christian sort of story, right? It's like everlasting life. Like, what does that even mean? Like, I used to object to that. I'm like, what is this kind of silly? Like being in a sort of like old folks home or something where someone takes care of you and everything's Gucci, that's not, I never really bought into that, but if you look at it from like a Darwinian perspective, really what you're saying is like, if I take care of things now and make the sacrifices now in the present moment, then like my life will continue, and my life tomorrow will be better, and my family will be better. And even after I'm gone, my family will carry on the legacy. And like through like Darwinian terms, I will live forever, at least maybe not forever, but for long enough that, as far as you can imagine in the future, it kind of gets blurry,
Yeah.
The further you look into the past, the blurrier it gets. And the further you look into the future, the blurrier it gets, So like you shouldn't spend too much time in either of those places, You kind of got to focus your attention to the here and now where you actually can do something, And Peterson talks about this too, is like the focal point of the cross representing like maximal suffering, right? And really, I would argue it's the only place of suffering. Like anything that's happened in the past, all that suffering is bought and paid for. If you were a man that went to war and died, but your country lived on, like you made that sacrifice, you suffered. But like now you're like whoever's living now doesn't have to pay for that. You already paid for it.
Yeah.
Similarly, like there's going to be suffering in the future, but the only way to like reduce it is to suffer now.
Yeah.
You put yourself through hardships now and to sacrifice now, so it all kind of connects in like a linear timeline.
Wow.
And I think for me personally, God the Father is more masculine, it's more ordered, like because the past is ordered. Like we sort of know what happened. Like we might believe some things that happened that aren't exactly true. So there's still some chaos within the order. And then alternative, like the other side of it is the future is mostly feminine. It's mostly chaotic. We don't really know what it's going to be, Now we know some of it. Like there's certain things that are more reliable, like for example, like $1 is probably still going to be worth something tomorrow, There's no guarantee, but it's like part of the unknown future, but it's like, it's mostly, so it's like kind of almost like you'd almost imagine it like the yin yang symbol, right? It's like the same thing. They're kind of trying to tell us the same thing, is that like your job is to stay in the middle, to kind of walk that line, stay in the present moment and understand that there's chaos and order and there's order and chaos, but like you got to live now to like, to maximize it for everyone in the future,
Wow.
So that's what I think. What do you think about all that?
I mean, I don't have any thoughts. That's interesting.
I don't know if I went off a little too much of a tangent there, but
that's like really interesting. I mean, what I can tell is you've been reading more Jordan Peterson, which is awesome.
Yeah. Listening to his podcast, it's sometimes it's better to look at it like on paper, right? If you just kind of put like a cross on paper,
the
left side is like the sum of the past, right? And the right side is like sum of future.
Yeah.
You're at that little focal point in the middle, and you can kind of put that little focal point right at your mind's eye.
Yeah.
Like that's where you're at, There. The past is behind you. The future's in front of you. You can only move forward, but you can't move forward too quickly, Because like if you're spending too much time thinking about the future, you end up with a lot of anxiety because the future's chaotic. And if you spend too much time thinking about the past, you end up kind of depressed.
Yeah.
So instead, if you can kind of hone that in and focus on the here and now, ultimately, I think you end up better off.
Yeah.
As long as you're paying, respecting all of the sacrifices that the past has made for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like the road is one of my favorite examples. Like you drove here on a road, or you rode your bike on the road, or whatever. Like you didn't build that.
Yeah.
Like you don't even know who built that or when it was built or anything. But it's something that makes your life way easier.
Yeah.
And life didn't always used to be this easy,
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah, it helps me think about it,
That's
and like
awesome.
what your role is.
Yeah.
Your role is to be the hero now.
I agree.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Anything else on that one?
Not really. I mean, I really, it's an interesting interpretation of the Holy Spirit, and I think it's really funny because they always say the Holy Spirit comes into you right? When God's talking in you can feel it. The Holy Spirit comes into you. So the Holy Spirit is kind of like the president, right? The Holy Spirit's what comes into you. So just feel the Holy Spirit always, and just act in your best interest, act in best interest of everyone.
Yep. And it's the great heroes of the past, are in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All your ancestors that went through all their hardships and made the sacrifices. That's like who you are. That's inside you. So like you just got to bring it forward, and it takes a little effort to bring it forward, but you can bring it forward and you can do amazing things with it when you do,
Agreed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, what do you want to hear about next? Harry Potter?
Harry Potter.
All right. So, Raven and I listened to the books, to the audio books when we were hiking. So it's pretty cool. I had like my Apple ear pods or whatever they're called. So I would put one in one ear and she would take the other one in her ear and we would hike together.
Aww.
It was great. Like it was so cool to like kind of go on that journey, And I had listened to them previously and read some of the books previously too, but I got so much more meaning out of them this time. And I think it's because of the things I've learned from studying Jordan Peterson's work, like the archetypes, the character archetypes and what they represent, got so much more out of it. But there's so much I can talk about, but I think the main thing I want to talk about is the Hogwarts houses. Did you know that? You know about the Hogwarts houses?
Yeah, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, Gryffindor, and Slytherin.
That's right. So I think, JK Rowling doesn't like explicitly say any of this, but I think there's a lot of like things you can extract from what she's like saying there, So the two main things I want to talk about are the colors and their animal mascots. So let's start with the colors. I think it gives us a clue on like the order that these things should be placed in. The colors are well, they each have two colors, but let's focus on one of their colors: black, bronze, silver, and gold. So you have like the three. I don't know what you'd call them, like the Olympic colors or whatever. The medals, bronze, silver, and gold, and then black. So like black is sort of like fundamental, and that's the Hufflepuff, and that's like humble, hardworking, slow and steady, doing the right thing. And then next is bronze, and that's the Ravenclaw, and that's like intelligence and vision and the ability to see kind of your options and like what's available to you. So like your hard work actually goes towards something. So you're not just like digging a ditch and then filling it in every single day. So anyway, having that vision is next. So then, what do you do with that vision? Well, next is silver, and that's the Slytherin. Have his ambition. So they can see this whole field, right? But they can actually pick something specific and like set a goal and strike with like lethal, like with a lethal dose, to gain their ambition, whatever it is, Yeah. And last is gold, which is the Gryffindor, the ultimate, the hero,
The hero.
And what they do is like, so you set this ambition, right? Well, then you have to have the courage to strike, like to actually not only set the ambition, but to go after it. You know? And like the Gryffindors are kind of known for like this pairing of like bravery and stupidity. They kind of go hand in hand, It's like, is it, to stand up to like an army, let's say, like one person standing up to an army, that's brave, but it's also stupid. Like, probably not going to win, But anyway, so I think she gives us a really good clue there. It's like whenever you're at a new transition period in your life, think about them in that order. Like first thing you got to do is be humble, and hardworking. Then you got to be smart. You got to be able to see the field and see your options, Then you got to set a goal and ambition, and then you got to have the courage to go after it, even if it might seem stupid and unattainable, So I think that's all pretty cool.
Wow.
Questions on that before I start talking about their animal mascots? Because I think that's the even cooler part. Questions on that or no?
No, I'm good. I'm okay. Ready for the animal mascots.
Okay, cool. So their mascots are the badger, right? That's the
Hufflepuff.
Yep. Yeah. And then you have the eagle, which is Ravenclaw. Then then you have the snake, which is Slytherin, and you have the lion, right?
Yeah.
And when you go to Hogwarts, you get assigned to one of your houses, and it's like based on whatever your characteristics are sort of strongest in that category. So if you're really brave, like you're a Gryffindor. If you're really smart, you're probably a Ravenclaw, And that's all well and good. Like everyone is kind of stronger in certain categories or whatever, But I think really what the message of the story really is that it's not good enough to just be an eagle. It's not good enough. You actually need to combine all these things. Like intelligence isn't enough. You need heart, and you need ambition, and you need bravery. You need to combine all these things. So what happens when you combine a badger with an eagle, with a snake, with a lion? What do you get?
What do you get?
A dragon.
Oh.
Like the body type of the badger, the kind of like the long, like sort of like the body shape and the claws, And then you have the wings of the eagle, and the vision of the eagle, with like the scales of the snake and like the tongue of the snake and like the venom of the snake, with like the head of a lion, and like smash them all together and you kind of have a dragon effectively.
Wow.
Right? A theme in Harry Potter 2 is the dragons. I mean, they're in the first book, the fourth book, and the seventh book, I think. But anyway, like I think that's really what she's trying to tell you is like you can do a lot as a badger. Like you can be successful as a badger,
Wow.
But you can also defeat a badger, Badgers lose, but like dragons they're unstoppable.
Yeah.
And if you can combine all those traits into one and be a dragon, then the world's yours, man.
That's crazy.
That's cool, right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. And like, I don't know if that's on the internet somewhere. Maybe somebody had that idea before I had it, but I like extracted that sort of independently when I was like thinking about the Hogwarts houses and like what they represent. And like me personally, I'm sort of a Slytherin. So the challenge there, especially if the goal is to be a dragon, like if I could be a snake, it's easy for me to be a snake, But if I want to be a dragon, what I really have to work on is being hardworking and humble, because like the opposite of the snake is sort of the badger. If you can kind of put them in a circle, black, bronze, silver, gold, then like opposite of silver is the black badger. So for me to progress towards being a dragon, I have to work on being more humble. I have to work on being more hardworking, and having like a clearer, stronger moral compass, And then you add that with some stupid bravery and some vision and intelligence, and hell, you're a dragon ready to take on the world,
Dude, that's so cool.
She's a genius, man.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that even exists. That whole
Wow.
Yeah. Do you know what Hogwarts house you're in?
Probably not. I'm one of those people. I probably would have had a lot of trouble fitting in all four, because I would have had all four qualities, but not any that would have stuck out. So
you should take those online quizzes sometimes and see where.
Yeah, I should. Remember back in the day when they would trend on Facebook and be like, "Which house of Harry Potter are you?" And like people would spend hours taking those quizzes, and then the algorithm stopped favoring that stuff to favor political discourse, and then people started arguing and stopped using Facebook because of that.
Yeah, you should do it because I think it helps to. It's just kind of a reminder of like the things that you're strong in and the things that you're weak in.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to be a more complete person, like good to know that,
Yeah.
So.
I'll next time we talk, I will take a quiz. I'll take 3 quizzes just to see.
I would recommend there's 2 I would recommend. One is from time.com. And then there's also the Pottermore, which is like the official whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think that one takes a little bit longer, but a little more fun. The time one's, I think, pretty quick. But in theory, they should both yield similar results,
Good to know.
If I were to guess, you're probably Ravenclaw.
Okay.
Just a guess.
I probably would fit in better with Ravenclaw, because when my college, University of Pennsylvania, had 4 colleges, right? And I got along best with the engineers. Like Ravenclaws would be the engineers.
Sometimes.
Yeah, the Hufflepuffs would have been the nurses at my school. The Slytherin would have been the warden, like the Trump people, and then the Gryffindors would have been the college, which is what I was in.
Yeah.
So I most of my friends were engineers. They were Ravenclaws, so
Yeah.
it makes sense that way.
I think so. I think that's what my gut tells me anyway. It'd be and usually you're not like 100% of anything. I think when I took the test, I was like 75% Slytherin and like 25% Gryffindor, which sort of makes sense, for me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. But dude, I think this is a great place to end off.
Too.
Be the dragon.
Exactly. Become the dragon.
Become the dragon. That's what our country needs to do too. Our country needs to remember, combine a lot of stuff that works, work on stuff that doesn't work, be a full package.
Exactly. Become the dragon. I think
that's what made America great. If you're a dragon, you're adaptable.
Right.
If you're just a badger, then you get eaten by a lion, right? That's the thing.
Mm-hmm. Or bitten by a snake or scooped up by an eagle or whatever. And maybe you can defend yourself too. I mean, you're not going to lose every fight, but nobody beats a dragon except for another dragon.
Exactly. And unfortunately, there are some dragons that are emerging in this world that are not United States. So we really have these next 50 years are crucial for a society. They really are.
Yeah. Excellent talking to you, brother.
Dude, great talking to you, man.
All right. Much love. Talk to you soon, friend.
Definitely. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.